Valentine.
Here.
And Chair Ginder.
Here.
We have 3 present.
Okay, and then the next item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. If we can just unanimously, is there any, all say aye? Agenda is adopted. I don't have a chair's report other than what we're going to discuss in item number 4. And in item number 4, which is a discussion of the general language, and is I took that in my mind to be a review to make sure it comports with the principles of the plain language charter. In my review, as I looked through this, the main issue that I saw, but the only issue that I saw was the use of shall in many cases, which is a term that is no longer used in the charter. And so we have a number of situations in which shall could be replaced by either must or is or something in that. I don't know what the experiences of the other members of the committee were. If you've had a chance to look at it, that's what I saw. Is we went through this. So, for example, if you look at section 1.4, powers plenary, you know, it said the city shall have, instead of just saying the city has all powers. Halfway through the city, it shall be deemed, instead of just saying it is conferred. The charter is to be construed liberally. And it's those kind of changes to remove the shall into either a strong must or is, and remove the sometimes subtleties that appear in shall and how people interpret it. So that was one of the guiding principles for those of us who were around during the plain language charter, was to remove that and substitute must and may for shall and some of the other language. So that was the primary driver that was a driver in the plain language charter, was the use of those kind of words. In my review, this kind of thing pops up in a number of the sections. It kind of jumps at you when you start looking for shalls, and those are easily, in my mind, changed. And so I don't know if anybody saw anything else, but that's all that I really saw as we went through the different sections. Otherwise, I thought the language is generally fairly clear. I know that there are issues because of big changes in Civil Service Commission and boards that are probably going to be better handled as the amendment review group kind of looks at some of that. Because I think there'll be a number of other changes in that area.
Which area?
Chapter 10, which is kind of a new boards and commission section.
Yeah.
And then a different part of article, chapter 9, article 8 or 9, where it talks about the Civil Service Commission. There's dramatic changes in that. And so one of the things that I'm going to suggest in the full charter commission is those items go to the amendment review committee, the government structure committee, to really focus on the actual government structure changes that were implemented a year ago and that we're playing with right now. I mean, focusing our review on the language on those things that we're going to really look at hard right now.
Mr. Chair, in addition to shall, which isn't a difficult one for us to let go of, is gendered language. And I think you'll notice that the attorney's office did, I think, a good job of trying to go through and eliminate any reference to his, her, stuff, and just repeated titles or rewrote it in a way that didn't require a reference using gendered pronouns. So that was another thing I know we spent a lot of time on when we were drafting these originally.
Thanks for pointing that out. I know the city attorney did spend time trying to get rid of that gender-specific language and gender neutral. So, at any rate, we have 2 other members. Yes, Commissioner.
Yeah, my understanding is we were also going to look at this language to see if there was anything in here that was substantive that didn't necessarily jump out as substantive. And one of those things that I saw is in Article 4 on the first page, which talking about the legislative body.
Article 4, which section?
4.1A. And the policymaking authority has been switched over to the oversight, which, how I would read it then, would be that the city's general legislative policymaking and oversight authority, giving authority to all three of those.
Exactly, that was the intent, and I think that, when I know when the city attorney made that change, that was the intent, was to put authority under, to clarify it was really for all three, because it kind of looked, when it was just following policymaker, that authority was only policymaker, and that was never anybody's intent.
Okay.
The intent was always to have authority governing legislative policymaking and oversight, so there was really a clarification of what I think people understood was intended to be their
Sure.
authority.
And then
Go ahead.
in terms of the substantive changes, like for example, the removal, no, not the removal, sorry, the situation where there is a, like it was this year, where a council member resigned,
Mhm.
basically during the election, it's
That-
now changed to where that seat would be vacant right now until January.
And that's a substantive change. My feeling that was, that would be part of the government structure review, is to see, because it is a policy change and how they're filling that seat. So it does change what happened, for example, this year. It would be different if
Yeah.
this amendment was drafted or adopted, and I believe that that would be something we would look at as part of the government structure language. Yes.
I just, now that Commissioner Doherty has brought up this first section 4.1A, it, for me, it raises a question, which is giving the, so clarifying this language so that the city council also has oversight authority. Or, I mean, the language seems fine, but is it any kind of a substantive change when the mayor now has oversight authority? Or maybe not. I mean, is that a question that we need to ask?
The charter says the mayor has direction and supervision and
Right.
oversight.
Right.
And so I think the intent of that language, which I don't think changes, is that they have the highest level kind of policy, and what's the general oversight of the city? All the implementation runs from the executive and administrative side,
Right.
but if they don't like the executive the way it's been executed, they may have some authority on going back to budgetary issues or something like that and saying, well, we're not happy with that. So in essence, there's a general oversight authority, but,
And that's the,
I mean, I understand what you're saying, because every time we move a word
because it-
around.
Right, and it sort of seems to blur the lines.
I'll tell you, Commissioner, that in the ordinance that the council and mayor both adopted, they've created an oversight division in the auditor's office, which is under their general purview. And so I think that language is to tie those together to say the oversight is any type of review or evaluation that they might direct the auditor to take on. We had a business plan for that department. Did they execute? Did they meet the goals? Were they over budget? Why or why not?
Yeah.
That's my assumption.
Yeah.
That's kind of the understanding that I had, how it was being viewed for the city attorney's office. And you know, contextually, in that sense, it makes sense. I understand what you're saying, that is it bringing confusion? We can think more about that, but
Yeah. No, I don't think moving the word authority changes anything, that's the question, using the word oversight.
that's in the original plain language. So. Other comments, commissioners?
I just have this is just a clarifying question, because I didn't understand. On 4.4, section A4G, where the changes. See it?
4.4AG.
Yeah. Yeah, to removal. Instead of an elected officer, it is just the mayor or council member. And I'm wondering who would the other elected officers if this would have?
Would have applied?
Yeah.
Arguably park board, arguably DET. And so what we were restricting it to was council members. So the council can remove its own members and not to go into removing other elected officers.
So who removes that?
Mr. Rice, who removes the park board commissioners?
The voters could. There's a petition provision in the charter that says 10 voters can petition the district court and ask for removal.
And I don't believe there's any provision for removal of DET members.
No, but it also was sort of in a weird conflict, Commissioner, in terms of when you look at the article on BET, if there's a vacancy, how the replacement's done, and it's different for the park board, so there were different ways of handling the other, what we'll call an elected board, and it felt weird for the council to have this sort of super power over boards that the voters elect. And so because of that history there, when we were looking at this and said we should think about updating this, it was to restrict it to the mayor and council and not to leave out the question, does that include park board and BET, which are accountable to the voters and not to the mayor and council?
And historically, the charter has always just included council members in the council removal provision.
Well, at one point, we had an elected comptroller and an elected treasurer, and ostensibly, like the mayor, they were elected at large. They also could have been subject to this, but now you're going way back in time.
But just prior to the plain language charter amendment, I think the only members that the council members could remove were council members. So this language continues, but it's always been historic practice. If there are no other comments, I have a proposal on this, which is I've gone through this, I would be willing to go through this, talk to the city attorney's office, who seems to be the keeper of the documents, and propose changes to them, get it back to them, and then at our next meeting, have it come back time for our next meeting, where we can look at the proposed changes, which I think will be primarily just this kind of shallow language going through there, and provide a head meeting so that we can all look at it and get input on that. But I found it's helpful to have one person just go ahead and draft it to give somebody something to talk about. And that's what I would propose doing, if that's acceptable to the committee.
And bring it back to who?
To the city attorney's office, which has been kind of the keeper of the document.
Right.
So they can incorporate these changes, reflect the changes, and then for us to take a look at it and say,
It would be us to be this committee?
this committee,
Okay.
then once we are okay with it, then we'll bring it forward to the full
Okay.
commission. But it will come back here first.
Okay.
I don't know that we need a motion on that, I'll just go ahead and do that, and we can just kind of record that in minutes now. Unless there's anything else that people would like to talk about?
I mean, if you would, I'm just curious on the process. I missed the last meeting, it was up at Charlton Brainerd. The issue of the Ethical Practices Board is, who's gonna review that? Is that this committee, does it go to another body?
The intention is that the Charter Commission meeting on Friday is to move that to the Amendment Review Committee, which is basically the committee that takes on new ideas and to take a look at that and explore it and kind of separate it out from the government structure.
Okay, so what's the best way for the park board to get their input onto that? Just write to the amendment review committee? Should we
Yes.
have, okay.
Yeah. And I believe that is chaired by Commissioner Kozak.
Okay. Maybe one other question, if I could, since you're here and the committee's here, I'll make it quick. 1.1 on the powers plenary. And I mean, I think we actually considered language like this in the plain language
Yes.
charter review. But the second sentence there, this charter shall be, which is or, you know, is to be construed
Mhm.
liberally in favor of the city, and the specific mention of particular powers is not to be construed as limiting in any way the generality of the powers
Mhm.
hereby conferred. Could I ask where that came from and what the thinking was?
I can't tell you specifically offhand. I know that St. Paul's charter has some kind of similar language. This kind of language, I think, also may show up in a model charter from the league. So there are variations of this kind of
Okay.
more expansive language that are floating around up there. But if you wanted to look at something, I would suggest St. Paul and the League of Cities handbook that they have in charter cities.
You know, when we did the plain language charter, Melendez was kind of the, as you said, the drafter or the oracle. So you could kind of talk to Brian and he'd say, well, you know, here's the thinking. Who's the Ben Franklin or Thomas Jefferson on this document?
Success has many fathers.
Okay.
Um,
And in this case, mothers.
Anyway,
Mothers.
I would just say I was not happy with the existing language myself. I think it's necessarily limiting.
This language?
No, the existing language.
The existing language.
I think there were several attorneys, that's why I threw it.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of an interesting concept in the sense that do you look at a charter or a constitution as a document of limitation or a document of permission?
Yeah.
Now, when you get to cities, it's a little different than a federal government or a state government, but I also think given, you got Minneapolis, which is a pretty engaged citizenry, the level of suspicion in the government will ebb or flow depending on, you know, the position of the sun and the moon.
Yeah, and the intention is, you know, if you look at, you know, the chart, or the Constitution, the state grants us the home rule charter and the ability to exercise powers, and so what the city really should do is say, we want to exercise all the powers that
Yep.
are possible under the Constitution,
Yeah,
and that's a broader grant.
yeah.
That's what-
I see, I don't know that I've seen the use of liberal in a city charter though so much, but that's just a thought. So that's really more the
Yeah,
legal ones.
yeah.
And I think you did hear from at least some of us about the whole, you know, I talked to Casey about this at a meeting about the whole Chapter 10 ethical
Yeah.
practice thing. We, just so you know, I mean, the park board has asked us to kind of look at it and engage to make sure that, and I appreciate the questions that, you know, the other commission members have had, just to, it's like, that gives context, like what does this mean? What's the intent? Is it authority for all three of the city's oversight? And I think even on the plain language charter one, you probably hit on, plain language charter tried to encapsulate the charter as it was in 2010 when we had a strong city council form of government, and then the strong mayor thing came along, and so a lot of these words that were used just as recently as a decade ago now might have a lot different meaning given what happened with the strong mayor system. Because the current charter was really drafted with a strong council in mind. Or it preserved, I think, yeah, Peter knows there's always a like Fraser moving up to the third floor.
Strong council, strong.
Yeah, everybody's
Council,
strong,
whatever.
yeah, but I think the 2021 amendment pushed it in another direction,
Yes.
so, I mean, that's why,
Yeah, but- and that's a good point, Brian. I mean,
yeah, the words then, now it's, is the glass half full or half empty?
yeah.
And so the words now look like in a little different shade of gray.
And that's I think a good thought to keep in mind as we look at this too.
Yeah, that was a question that Commissioner Doherty asked, you know, what are we talking about? That a movement of one word in the charter can mean an awful lot.
Yeah. I remember saying that a lot 10 years ago.
You did? Yeah, no, Peter was, we were in this room for some of it.
Yes.
We have two other work groups established, right?
Sorry? Yes, we have two new work groups, general language, this one, and then appointments, which is
Just looking at
specifically
the
about.
appointment process. And when is it meeting?
That one is meeting on the 18th.
Monday.
Monday.
Next Monday.
Yes.
And
So-
then the full charter commission on Friday.
Friday.
Will be on Friday.
This week on
So,
Friday.
so since the move is Friday, then is the appointment subgroup meeting here or?
So the meeting will still be here, there will still be furniture here, and it'll still be open to the public, so we will be able to.
In this room, 319.
In this room.
Peter, Casey, what's the timeline to get this launched? Are we talking, when, be a month, 2 months, a year, 5 years? 10?
Let's see, I pension eligible.
And Brian, I think the easiest answer is, you know, there's gonna be separate, as this breaks
Tracks.
out, separate drivers. And I think the goal is at least on the appointment committee or the government structure committee is to move that forward so that there's stuff on the ballot. There's language on the ballot this year.
Or in 2024?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that puts the timeline, you know, we
Yeah.
would have to have something done by
But,
May.
May.
but I think, I don't want to misspeak, when we, the staff, presented it to you, the charter commission, the mayor and the council, our goal was to say, there's a lot of change across this document. And much of it is highly technical and sort of tweaking around the edges. If there are things that we could do where the charter commission agrees, the council does by 13 and the mayor agrees,
Okay.
we'd like to do as much as possible through ordinance, leaving only for ballot questions, those things where those three groups have no agreement.
Okay.
And then send that to the voters. So, I mean, I would hope that some of this, between the 15-member commission, the 13 council, and the mayor, there's agreement, and we can get that done by ordinance. I
Okay.
don't know how overly hopeful that is, but.
Well, if not, it would be really quite a ballot initiative.
I don't think we'd send the whole thing on one ballot.
You never know. Ask people to delete shall.
Yes. Shall we delete shall?
We did it once, and the voters voted on it.
I know, but ironically, I do believe there's a form for ballot questions that says shall.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think it's in state law
Yeah.
that we still use the word shall.
I mean, when they.
The great irony is, shall we delete shall from the charter?
Brian's whole introduction, where he talked a lot about the word shall.
Yep.
If there's nothing else, then I think we can stand adjourned, absent objection. Thank you for turning that.